Obama's strategic naïveté. Obama's Memoirs, Volume 1. Now, reading Obama's memoirs reinforced my belief that the man is mediocre par excellence. Much of the first half of the book, his memoirs, lacks substance and even style. This review will address only Obama's foreign policy perceptions and descriptions. The below few lines about wars on page 329 really shook my belief in this character who shockingly served as US President for 2 terms. The war in Afghanistan, soon to be the longest in American history. The war in Iraq, where nearly 150,000 American troops were still deployed. The war against Al Qaeda, which was actively recruiting converts, building a network of affiliates, and plotting attacks inspired by the ideology of Osama bin Laden. This is pure and unadulterated nonsense that you read in these memoirs. To call Afghanistan a war would be rather ludicrous statement, keeping in view the odds involved. Obama's description of so-called war against Al Qaeda was also highly exaggerated as well as inflated. After all, where can anyone quantify and state how many casualties the Al Qaeda inflicted on the US military? This is a serious question. As one who is based in Afghanistan, these were written in 2020 or so, and one who has seen US-Afghan war closely, I can state with confidence that so-called Al-Qaeda cannot be held responsible for even 0.001% of US military deaths. This is my personal observation, having been in Afghanistan. Now, Obama makes further, false claims. As we saw closely, some 99% of US military casualties were inflicted by Pakistani state-supported Taliban proxies in the US-Afghan war. And here I read about a man, sadly President of USA for 8 years, is writing such pure and unadulterated nonsense. But this was only the beginning of reading utter nonsense, as readers of this review will see in the subsequent pages. On page 323, Obama introduces a character who was to prove a fatal disaster to USA's Afghan war. Page 323. Quote, Mr. Obama states, a well-regarded former CIA analyst and Middle East expert named Bruce Riedel to lead a 60-day review meant to shape our Afghan strategy. How on earth was a pedantic CIA bureaucrat shape USA's Afghan strategy? Question mark. My foot. These statements well illustrate extreme naivete of this Chicago lawyer who was to play havoc with US Army in Afghanistan from 2008 to 2012. Obama starts making absolute nonsense statements on page 325. Quote, salvage the country from total collapse now with Afghanistan looking like it too was sliding into a sinkhole. It was perhaps natural that the military leadership wanted more there as well, and because until recently they had been working with a president who had rarely questioned their plans or denied their requests, it was probably inevitable that the debate over how much more would become a recurring source of strife between the Pentagon and my White House. Unquote. Egoism, my White House. This scribe was based in Afghanistan in 2006, and the country was not at all sliding into a sinkhole as Mr. Obama fallaciously, rather falsely, claims and misleadingly proclaims. Contrary to Obama's false claims, the US military was pursuing a careful military strategy in Afghanistan designed to expose minimum US soldiers to risk, and all through President Bush 8 years tenure, the US military had suffered less than 400 fatal casualties due to actual fighting in Afghanistan. In Obama's disastrous, by disastrous I mean for US Army tenure, US military was to suffer 1,400 fatal battle casualties and nothing worthwhile or substantial was achieved. This is the pathetic performance of this Obama. US fatal military casualties in actual fighting in 2007 were 83, while as we will see, Obama's badly planned and directionless so-called surge doubled and trebled these fatal casualties. Now this is the 2007 analysis. Killed in real combat casualties region-wise, total 83. As you can see in the map, details I don't want to discuss, you can research. Now as far as I clearly recollect, there was no operational or strategic crisis in Afghanistan in 2008, early on the eve of Obama presidency. So Obama's claims are blatantly false. On page 326, our naive lawyer from Chicago comes up with an absolute nonsense apology of strategy as below. Page 326, Obama Memoirs, Bruce Riedel's nonsense strategy. Now quote, a month later, Riedel and his team completed their report, says Mr. Obama, continues, their assessment offered no surprises, but it did help articulate our principal goal to disrupt, dismantle and defeat Al-Qaeda in Pakistan and Afghanistan and to prevent their return to either country in the future. Unquote. My foot. As far as this scribe saw, there was no Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan or Pakistan. It's total, bogey, false claim, typical politician. USA captured Afghanistan in 2001. Now please note, with zero military casualties in actual fighting. So much for Obama's nonsense assertions regarding Al-Qaeda. Totally false claims. I don't know how he became the president. As far as this scribe closely saw, while serving as a contractor in Afghanistan in Helmand and Kunduz, 99.99% of fatal casualties on the US troops in Afghanistan were inflicted by so-called Afghan Taliban, who were clearly Pakistani state proxies or at least operated from bases in Pakistan. Obama's analysis are a sorry proof of his intellectual bankruptcy and lack of strategic resolution in analyzing facts forthrightly and bluntly. Instead, we find in this apology of a book by a former US president dumb twists, petty hair splitting, and supremely non committal statements like as below. Page 326. Obama's contradictory statements and juggling of language. Quote, the report's added emphasis on Pakistan was key. Not only did the Pakistan military and in particular its intelligence arm ISI tolerate the presence of Taliban headquarters and leadership in Quetta near the Pakistan border, but it was also quietly assisting the Taliban as a means of keeping the Afghan government weak and hedging against Kabul's potential alignment with Pakistan's arch rival India. That the US government had long tolerated such behavior. Unquote. Now Obama makes roundabout statements not clearly stating that Pakistani supported Taliban proxies with headquarters at Quetta accounted for 99.99% of US Army fatal casualties in Afghanistan. Such statements may fool the layman reader but are absolute nonsense for serious Afghanistan analysts and observers. Sadly, I expected serious and substantial analysis from a former US president, but Obama's shallow analysis was deeply disappointing. Like all throughout this book, Obama analyzes no solid mechanism instituted by the USA to monitor Pakistan's actions against hostile infiltration in Afghanistan. In a consultancy assignment in 2012-14, this scribe was shocked to learn that the US State Department, Pentagon, CIA, and DIA were so badly led and ham-handedly run that no such mechanism was instituted by the USA at all. The map below summarizes US strategic failure in dealing with Pakistan, failure of US officials dealing with Pakistan summed up. Personal perks and privileges, salary, etc. drawn 100%. All claims made good. Cushy time in Pakistan. Ability to make Pakistan deploy even more than one battalion to interdict Taliban infiltration in Afghanistan. Marked as red, 1500 kilometers. Border 0%. Not a single battalion on the 1500 long border, 1500 kilometer between Zob and Taftan. 25 billion US aid given to Pakistan in between 2001 and 14 for doing nothing to assist US war in Afghanistan. Now, very interesting point. Pakistan did deploy 80,000 troops in this South Waziristan and North Waziristan, but these troops had no connection with any major attacks by insurgents on the US troops in Afghanistan. So this again was a questionable affair because it didn't affect the US operations, it didn't help the US Army in Afghanistan. This was the position all along in both Bush and Obama era, so Obama's claims about all he did to regulate Pakistan are nothing else but white lies. Obama states that Riedel report stated that unless Pakistan stopped sheltering Taliban, US efforts in Afghanistan would not succeed. However, all along this lengthy book, much of it a sheer waste of stationery, Obama makes no serious efforts to tell the reader what efforts his administration made and more seriously, how miserably he failed. Every page of this book was a recurring and painful disappointment. Like Obama has nothing to state about how clueless and confused Gates was about the conduct of Afghan war. Like Gates' treatment about why US lives were wasted in barren wastes like Helmand are evasive and ambiguous, and an insult to the memory of 800 or so US lives pointlessly lost in Helmand. On page 340, Gates, another evasive and naive character, offers a lame duck excuse why US Marines were sent to be sacrificed for no strategic purpose in Helmand, and Mr. Gates evasively says Marine General Conway wanted them deployed as a Marine only show. My foot. Helmand, as I worked there on US aid projects in 2004-5, contained nothing strategic except sand and drugs and morphia paste labs, and there was nothing strategic in Helmand. Now, why on earth did Gates allow US lives to be sacrificed for no strategic purpose will always remain an inexcusable blot on Gates' shoulders as well as McChrystal and Bruce Riedel's shoulders. Obama praises Gates all along but fails to see any of Gates' major strategic sins. Like Gates totally misses the fact that the real insurgents' bases and havens in Pakistan were never attacked as the USA as a state did not possess the strategic resolution to attack. Obama is intellectually dishonest while discussing sacking of General McKiernan and totally hoodwinks and hides the fact that the real reason for removal of McKiernan was his bluntness. He saw the real issue, McKiernan saw the real issue in destroying insurgent safe havens in Pakistan. Obama, Riedel, and Gates all three lacked the guts to deal with this central issue. They lacked the moral courage simply. And McKiernan guts were too much for them to handle. So they had cold feet and they scapegoated and sacked McKiernan. Michael Hastings, the famous US journalist, also singled out McKiernan's inability to suck. I repeat, Michael Hastings singled out McKiernan's inability to suck as his major disqualification. Gates was so clueless that he actually confessed in his memoirs that he had no idea why the US Army launched its major operations in Helmand. Now, coming back to Obama Memoirs, page 576, false claims about regaining territory. Mr. Obama states, the additional troops I had authorized had helped regain territory from the Taliban. The training of Afghan army had ramped up. McChrystal had even convinced President Karzai to venture out beyond his palace and start engaging the population to represent. He claimed to represent. Now, Obama's claims about regaining territory are white lies and not supported by hard facts of the situation on ground. Obama praises McChrystal's strategy and conduct of operations in Afghanistan, but what we saw with our own eyes was distribution of US soldiers in penny packets and presenting them on a platter for the Taliban to ambush at will and whim. Excerpts from this scribe's book, presented on a platter, illustrate specific US Army strategic and operational failures specifically in Obama presidency. Simple deductions. Now, till 2007, US casualties were very low, 263 combat deaths, and there was no strategic threat that necessitated US escalation into northeast region Kunar and southwest region Helmand. Now just see, major casualties were caused when US troops were concentrated in northeast Kunar, as you can see, and southwest. US operations were conducted at section, platoon, and company level in 2008, 9, 10, 11, and 12, which exposed US troops to insurgents and caused maximum casualties and pointless casualties. US forces were distributed into penny packets and presented on a platter to be attacked by insurgents. This was the criminal tactics used by McChrystal and again by patriots. Insurgents were not defeated, nor any strategic advantage wrested from insurgents in the above operations. No attempt was made to fence the Afghanistan Pakistan border through which all the infiltration and ingress of the insurgents was taking place. As you can see, maximum US casualties were caused by Pakistan based insurgents in northeast and southwest regions, 295 in northeast and 906 in southwest. Thus 1201 out of total fatal combat casualties of 1805. As you can see, maximum US casualties were caused in the southwest and pointlessly thanks to this character Bruce Riddle. No attempt was made by the US to attack the Taliban center of gravity in Pakistani Balochistan, at least by drones. No attempt was made to fence this border 1500 km, and Taliban ingress continued without any obstacle or obstruction. Obama fails to justify his Libyan faux pas, and every word and line regarding the Libyan affair was shocking proof of how US leadership had qualitatively deteriorated. That such highly mediocre characters like Obama could rise to the office of US President was simply stranger than fiction. And the total intellectual dishonesty of the Nobel Prize organization in awarding the Nobel Prize to a monster who destroyed Syria and Libya and launched the highest number of drone strikes on two districts in Pakistan on people who had little to do with 99% US deaths in Afghanistan. Reading chapter 27 of this book convinced me that Obama deserves a Nobel Prize for supreme intellectual dishonesty and masterly lies. His whole narrative about OBL can be termed as sheer lies. Two of Pakistan's ISI chiefs publicly stated that Pakistani state knew about OBL's location all along, but Obama weaved masterly lies in this narrative.